My name is Ryan, and I'm 42 years old. I work for a company in the apparel industry. When people think of apparel, they might picture someone stylish and slim, but unfortunately, I'm more on the chubby side. With blood pressure concerns. Every year during my health checkups, I receive lifestyle advice. I used to be slim, rocking a 28-inch pair of jeans with ease, but with age and stress piling up, I've gained a more age-appropriate physique. Working in the fashion industry, appearances matter. I try to stay clean and well-groomed, but controlling my weight has been a real challenge. To be fair, I did manage to get close to my younger self's weight once, but over the last few years, thanks to severe stress and pressure, I've gained it all back spectacularly. And it's not just a weight regain. I should probably call it something beyond that. I mean, it's not double the weight or anything, but I'd say I've gained about 45 pounds compared to my youthful prime. None of my old clothes fit anymore, so I had to buy a whole new wardrobe. Thankfully, working for an apparel company has its perks, so I made full use of the employee discount. It's a pretty great benefit. The reason behind these extra 45 pounds of stress is crystal clear. It's my manager, Mary, who transferred to our department last year. She's highly ambitious and made waves as a charismatic salesperson in her hometown before being promoted to the main office. She went from customer service to a managerial role in the sales planning department at headquarters, and everyone was a bit thrown off. After all, she had zero practical experience in that field. Being a customer service pro doesn't automatically mean you can handle the behind-the-scenes work. Still, the company wasn't going to let someone with her reputation and sales results slip through their fingers. Mary had a model-like appearance, so the higher-ups likely assumed she could be a perfect fit for sales. Ryan, she's a real asset. I know you may have your reservations, but could you please find a way to support her smoothly and diplomatically? When David, the senior manager, says something like that, I can't help but reply, understood. Even without hands-on experience, she's been on the front lines, closest to the consumers. Since she's directly heard the voices of those who actually use the products, there's surely something we can learn from her. With a mix of anxiety and hope, we watched her. And she completely shattered those expectations. On her very first day, dressed to the nines, makeup and outfit perfectly on point, Mary opened with this gem. I'm so happy my talents are finally being recognized. But don't get it twisted. This is just the first step in my fabulous rise to the top. I'm using this as my stepping stone to greater things. We were all dumbfounded. Was that really her introduction to the team? Whether she was self-aware or clueless, calling herself a self-made success was a bold move. Either way, her first impression was a disaster. That was the beginning of my high-stress life. Mary's track record, though, was nothing short of impressive. She was #1 in nationwide sales for 3 years in a row. With her ability to adapt her conversations to each customer and make them feel understood, she was a legend in sales. She must be great at sales talk. Everyone expected as much. But no matter how much time passed, the only thing that came out of her mouth was endless bragging. Leave the sales to me. With my charisma, I'll be landing deals left and right. I'm a capable woman, you know. Maybe I'll make a legend here, too. It wouldn't be so bad if it was just bragging, but she always has to one-up others, which makes it even worse. Whenever I try to explain a project she's unfamiliar with, she immediately shuts me down. Just leave it to me. But, for this project, I said it's fine. Don't be so pushy, nobody likes a nagging guy. Even though she keeps shutting me down like that, all she does at client meetings is talk about herself. I'd been the top seller 3 years in a row. Trust me, if you leave it to me, everything will be fine. She throws out these baseless claims that leave clients confused. Well, maybe her sales talk isn't great, but her design ideas should work, right? After all, she's been styling customers one by one with tailored suggestions. Many of her clients became loyal fans of her style. With her sense of style driving new trends, next season's sales are sure to increase. There were such expectations as well. But it turned out to be nothing like that. Mary is the type to force her own sense of style onto others. Instead of suggesting looks that enhance a person's individuality, her approach is, if I picked it, it's definitely right. Most of her clients admire her personal style, so when their idol says, "This is perfect for you," they're thrilled and accept it without question. At this point, they're more like her followers. They are Mary's fan base. While her clients might be satisfied, things are different when it comes to planning. This plan will work. It's guaranteed to sell. Every proposal she proudly recommends is all about her personal taste. No doubt it would look stunning on her. It must make everyone turn around without a second thought. But proposing to the public isn't about that. There are plenty of people out there with different tastes than yours. We need to consider people with different values, too. When I tried to gently explain, she snapped back, "I'm your boss, okay? Stop addressing me so casually." "My apologies, Mary." "Good. And honestly, what do you, of all people, know about women's clothing? Hearing it from someone with a body like yours doesn't exactly inspire confidence." "Sure, my body isn't in the best shape right now." I imagine it's hard for Mary, with her obsession with beauty, to accept. But I've been in this industry for a long time, and I've seen trends come and go. I might not have the best personal style, but I'm confident in my ability to spot fashion trends. With all due respect, Mary, I think that keeping a more objective view on fashion can help us create unexpected hits. What are you talking about? People wear clothes for themselves, right? If you don't think subjectively, how can you express who you are? That may be true for a single fashionista, but Mary, this is our job. It's not about what we want to wear, but it's about what kind of trends we want to shape for the times. Without that mindset, we won't create any hits. You sure can talk. No wonder you're stuck as an assistant manager. It wouldn't bother me if she were just insulting me. But she's constantly putting down others, too. "Heather, what are you wearing? That outfit is beyond tacky. And you call yourself part of the planning department? Aren't you embarrassed? I'll pick out some clothes for you, so just give me the money." "No, it's fine. I was the top salesperson in the nation, and I'm offering to pick something that'll look good on you. Honestly, I should be the one getting paid for this. Now hurry up." "Mary, don't you think that's a bit over the top? How can anyone take the planning team of an apparel company seriously when you're dressed this badly?" I mean, she's got a point. But there's a way to say these things. She didn't need to announce it in front of everyone. She might not mean harm, but her confidence-fueled one-upmanship is brutal. Sure, she had a track record of success. But that was in her comfort zone, the sales floor, not exactly transferable to the behind-the-scenes work of the sales planning department. "Timothy, how could you not land this deal? Look at me. Every customer I target is a sure hit. You should try learning a thing or two. Comparing clothes to contracts doesn't really." "Don't talk back. Mary, Timothy is really putting in the effort. He's got a presentation coming up, right? Yes. Timothy's presentations are always well received. Please give him a bit more room to prove himself. You'll never sell clothes with that soft approach. Mary, this isn't the sales floor. I know that. Are you mocking me? No, I didn't mean it like that. I can't work with all this noise from useless people. I'm taking a break. Mary always does things at her own pace. She goes her own way, no matter what anyone says. No matter how much you try to reason with her, she doesn't listen. Worse yet, she's quick to make childish threats like, "You're really annoying." I'm telling this to our president, Mr. Anderson, and actually follows through with them, which is just a nightmare. Usually, complaints from a regular employee wouldn't even make it past the secretary. But Mary is different. After all, it was Mr. Anderson himself who personally convinced her to come to headquarters. He believes she's a top talent, and that's why she got this position. He has no idea what she's like when she's not on the sales floor. What a tragedy. There's nothing more unreliable than higher-ups who are completely in the dark. As expected, Mary's complaints were officially brought up, and I was declared to be in the wrong. Ryan, Mr. Anderson is furious that you aren't listening to Mary at all. That's not true. I'm following her instructions to the letter. Well, it's a problem either way. Just make sure not to upset her. I'm not her babysitter. Why do I have to keep her happy? Even David, our director, is the same. Who is he working for? Doesn't he feel ashamed giving orders like that? Mary's always had to be number one, as she has been her whole life. And now that she has the title of manager, her pride is through the roof. No one dares to question her anymore, and she's running wild with no brakes. It would be one thing if a clueless subordinate were going rogue, but when an out-of-touch, overconfident boss goes off the rails, the results are catastrophic. To make matters worse, she doesn't even realize she's off track. In her mind, the path she's on is the only one that's right, and she doesn't even see any other options. One minute she's boasting over here, the next she's throwing out careless comments that create confusion on the ground. And I'm always the one cleaning up the mess. Mary, please, before making any statements, could you at least get a consensus from the team? That's because they just have a bunch of consensus ideas? I couldn't tell if she was joking or serious. If I laughed, she'd snap, "What's so funny?" and get angry. If I tried to clarify, not consensus, it's consensus, she'd shoot back with, "Don't you dare talk down to me," in full-on demon mode. Honestly, pretending not to hear her is probably the best approach. Either way, it's pointless to resist her. I gave up on trying to educate her and instead focused all my energy on minimizing the damage she caused to the rest of the team. They say knowing when to give up is important, but was I wrong to give up so early? While I was busy managing my team, Mary's rampage grew stronger. I've got a dinner with Matthew from Foster Textiles tonight. Reserve a table at the Peaks Hotel restaurant. Wait, was that on the schedule? You can't even manage a calendar? Timothy, was there a dinner planned with Foster Textiles today? I'll check with Timothy, the person directly in charge. No, nothing like that. I just arranged it directly with Matthew. Just make the reservation. And of course, I want the best table. We'll have the special lobster course. Hold on, you can't use such an expensive restaurant for client dinners. And do you really expect Timothy and me to eat a full course? Why would you two be coming? Isn't this a business dinner? It's a date. What? You've never heard of doing sales through dating clients? You're dating for work? Why would a manager at a top company need to rely on something like that? Foster Textiles is an important client of ours. Their textiles are of excellent quality, and the products we make with their materials are highly regarded by consumers. It's true we should treat them well. But why do you need a full-course meal for two? Mary, we're perfectly capable of landing deals through legitimate business practices. Please stop with this date thing nonsense. Gosh, you're so annoying. Stop commenting on everything I do, you incompetent fool. I'm pointing it out because what you're doing is wrong, Mary. I want to respect you, I really do. Give me a reason to. Are you seriously lecturing your superior? Are you out of your mind? Whatever, I'm done asking you. Ryan, she just stormed off. Timothy mumbled, sounding defeated. Let her go. She's clearly after Matthew. Matthew is tall, good-looking, and single. Exactly the kind of guy Mary goes for, model-like, handsome, and a genuinely nice guy. Don't you think Matthew and I make a great pair? I'll never forget the way she said that and then laughed, with a smirk on her face. A few days later, I was summoned by Kenneth, the accounting manager. Ryan, what do you think you're doing? Ha? Do you really think this receipt will go through? What kind of business are you running? When I looked at the receipt Kenneth handed me, I nearly lost my soul. Dining costs, $1,500. Wait, I didn't spend that kind of money. What are you talking about? Your name is right here. Whenever we submit receipts for meals, we have to include the names of everyone present. And sure enough, next to the receipt was a list of names. Mine and Timothy's. The date was 3 days ago. Yes, it was that day when Mary declared, "Make a reservation at the restaurant." Apparently, Mary had made the reservation herself and gone out with Matthew. Realizing she couldn't justify that kind of expense for just the two of them, she dragged Timothy and me into it. Even if it was dinner for four, this is absurd. Did your department land some major contract? Because I haven't heard anything about it. Kenneth sneered, his eyes practically bulging with disdain. My stomach churned with anxiety. After getting chewed out by Kenneth, I returned to my office, only to be summoned by Mary. She was humming to herself as if nothing had happened, and I knew I couldn't let this slide. Determined, I walked over to her desk. Mary. Oh, Ryan. I'm getting married. What? This is the wedding invitation. You must attend, okay? What on earth is she talking about? It was so sudden that I couldn't keep up. What are you spacing out for? Are you really that shocked that I'm getting married? No, I mean, yeah, I guess. The conversation was so confusing, I had no idea how to respond. After a struggle, I finally managed to squeeze out some words. Who are you marrying? You want to know, huh? Not really. But she clearly wanted me to ask, so I played along. It's Matthew. Wait, Matthew? From Foster Textiles? Yep, Matthew from Foster Textiles. Looks like she was serious about going after him. He was so persistent with his approach, I just couldn't resist. She said that, but I'm sure it was her who pursued him. Poor Matthew probably got roped into proposing. So, that explains the restaurant fiasco from 3 days ago. It must have been the night he proposed, and apparently, it had to happen at the Peaks Hotel restaurant. She got a lobster full-course dinner, 2 bottles of the restaurant's finest wine, 108 red roses, and a sparkling platinum diamond ring. Wait, shouldn't he have covered the dinner if it was that important? I asked her, genuinely puzzled. Oh, you're so clueless. I got roses and an engagement ring, of course I had to pay for dinner. Otherwise, he'd think I'm a high-maintenance woman. The engagement ring was from some Harry whatever brand, and apparently cost $24,000. What an astronomical price! Suddenly, $1,500 for dinner didn't seem so bad, but for a regular office worker like me, that's still a whole month's pay. Wait a minute. If she's trying not to look high maintenance, why is she trying to expense the dinner? Doesn't that make her look exactly like a high maintenance woman? Everyone in the department is coming to the wedding. That's an order. Wait, Mary, people have their own schedules. You need to check their availability. No need. I'm the boss, and this is my wedding. How could anyone not celebrate such a happy occasion? But, no buts. Everyone's coming, no exceptions. The line between personal and professional was long gone, but with Timothy involved, I couldn't really brush her off. Still, wasn't it way too early to be handing out invitations? How long had she been planning this? She must have been gearing up for marriage for a while. As the wedding plans moved forward, she started assigning tasks to each of us. Timothy, you're good at PowerPoint, right? Make a video of how Matthew and I met. In PowerPoint? Yes, PowerPoint. I see. Sure, you can make a video in PowerPoint, but normally, you'd use actual movie software for that, right? Heather, you'll be giving the speech as my friend at the wedding. I'll pick out your dress because whatever you choose will be tacky. But, I'm not even your friend. Don't worry about it. I'm a very generous boss, so you can think of me as a friend. That's not the issue here. Why is one of her subordinates giving the friend of the bride speech? Mary, do you not have any actual friends? She's now selecting people for different tasks for her wedding, all while neglecting her actual job. Mary, more importantly, about next quarter's planning. What do you mean, more importantly? What could possibly be more important than my wedding? I can't believe they made someone like her a manager. It really makes me question the company's judgment. Mary has openly said before, when I have kids, I'll quit my job. So, I'm sure everyone is secretly thinking, just get married, have kids, and quit already. At least, that's what my gut is screaming. The day before the wedding, I got a sudden call from the bride, Mary, who was supposed to be on leave. She had taken a full week off to prepare for her wedding. I assumed she was finally worried about work, but no, she said this. About tomorrow's wedding, since some of the executives from headquarters are attending, the incompetent should stay home. This woman really only thinks about herself. Her unilateral declaration prompted my quick response. Okay. You're fine with that? Yes, since the executives from headquarters are coming, right? Exactly, so you have no seat. Got it. Well, I'm busy, so... Wait, hold on. Ignoring her attempt to continue the conversation, I hung up. The next day. Since I was no longer attending the wedding, I had some free time, so I decided to go to work. Lately, I've been so caught up with preparing for Mary's wedding reception entertainment that I haven't been able to focus on work as much as I'd like. But today is a day off, and since no one else is around, I can finally get some work done. As I was enjoying the freedom of working alone in the spacious office, the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, and it was Mary. Ryan? What the hell is going on? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Why hasn't anyone shown up? Apparently, as the wedding approached, none of the company guests had arrived. Mary, who clearly didn't have many friends, had filled her side of the guest list with co-workers. But now it was just her and one lonely executive from headquarters sitting there. Are you trying to humiliate me? Wait a minute, how is this my fault? I don't know, but it's your fault. You don't know, yet you're blaming me? Did you convince everyone to skip my wedding? What would I gain from doing that? You were mad I stole your client, right? Matthew's company, Foster Textiles, was the first big contract I ever secured. Matthew wasn't the point of contact back then, but we've maintained a relationship for nearly 20 years, even as the contacts changed. They produce incredibly high-quality textiles, and recently, they've developed a new fiber using biotechnology. This new product has caused a frenzy in the apparel industry, and it's become a fierce competition, with everyone scrambling to get a piece. Of course, I was in the game as well. While every company was vying for the exclusive contract, eyes glinting with ambition, Mary swooped in and secured not only the contract but the role of Matthew's wife. People in the industry had their opinions, but the higher-ups at our company were singing her praises, shouting "well done." The executives attending her wedding were probably there to celebrate this double victory. But that's only what she and the groom's side believe. Of course, they're probably excited about signing the exclusive contract. But I know that's not the only reason. Just get everyone here. We're running out of time. As much as I'd love to help, I really don't know. Maybe they got lost? All of them? All of them. That's impossible. This is a famous hotel right in front of the station. They must know where it is. Oh, right, I wouldn't know. I tossed the invitation, so I can't help you. Just do something. She begged in a desperate, almost tearful voice, but in my heart, I was practically cheering, "Serves you right." Still, I couldn't help but wonder why everyone was a no-show. Curious, I called Timothy. Timothy? You're not going to the wedding? Well, you're not going, right? She told me not to come. If you're not going, none of us can go either. Why is that? She said no incompetent people allowed, right? If you're incompetent, that makes us monkeys. Do you think monkeys are allowed at weddings? When Mary called me yesterday, I switched the phone to speaker mode while talking. I was eating instant noodles at the time, so my hands were full. I didn't think anyone else was around, but Heather walked in and overheard the conversation. Heather clearly heard Mary's comment, the incompetent should stay home. And apparently, she went around telling everyone, looks like the incompetent can skip the event. Our ever-humble co-workers decided they must be incompetent and opted to skip the wedding. That's what happened. What? You're the incompetent one. Why is no one showing up? How are you going to fix this? I'm not sure. Maybe you should invite some of your friends? Or better yet, use your beloved social media. Post something like, "Help! Need wedding guests." You could probably get 20 people to show up in no time. It reminded me of those stories where a restaurant owner gets last-minute cancellations and posts on social media to find people to eat the food they prepared. Maybe that would work here. I wasn't sure she could round people up in under 30 minutes, though. With the venue nearly empty, the executive from headquarters, sitting alone, eventually went to her dressing room to confront her. "Mary, what's going on? Why is no one here?" Well, it seems they all went to the wrong venue." "All of them?" "Yeah, it looks like it." "To the wrong place? At this famous hotel right in front of the station?" Maybe they weren't familiar with the area?" "Are you kidding me?" She went silent. Don't just sit there, say something. Shut up, shut up, shut up. It's not my fault. None of this is my fault. Hey, Mary, what are you saying to the executive from headquarters? Shut up, shut up, shut up. I don't care about him. What did you just say? Do you know who I am? Shut up. You, of all people, have no right to make a fuss. Just stay quiet, Kurt. Kurt? In the waiting room were the parents, relatives, and Matthew's family and friends, who had rushed over after hearing the commotion. You could practically see question marks floating over everyone's heads. Mary, what? Kurt, move. Get out of here. Oh. As it turns out, these two were actually dating. Curtis, also known as Kurt, is married, so it's definitely an affair. I had caught them on a date once by accident, so I knew about it, but they probably thought no one else had a clue. But no secret stays hidden forever. Eyes are everywhere. Now, their relationship had been exposed in front of everyone, and no matter how much they panicked, it was too late. They tried to cover it up, but with so many witnesses, there was no way to hide it. Mary, what's going on here? It's not what it looks like, Matthew. What exactly is it, then? Mary, what is this about? It's not what you think, Mom. Then explain yourself. Who is this man? I'm just passing through. How could you, Kurt? Was I just a fling to you? Mary, be quiet. What's going on here? And so, the scene descended into absolute chaos. This was the story I heard from someone at Foster Textiles who witnessed the whole thing, so it might be a bit embellished. But apparently, it was a complete disaster. Of course, the wedding was immediately called off, and the reception was turned into a party for Matthew's side of the family, who decided to make the most of the food. That part actually sounded kind of fun. As for Mary, she was hit with both a hefty fine for emotional damages and the cost of the wedding itself. Word of this reached the upper management at headquarters, and Curtis, a senior executive, was promptly demoted. He was transferred to a remote office. Of course, his family fell apart. Since his kids were already adults, his wife wasted no time in filing for divorce. Mary initially tried to blame me, shouting things like, "This is all your fault. You're so incompetent, that's why I was humiliated." But as all of her past misconduct came to light, she quieted down. Mr. Anderson was puzzled by the whole situation and conducted a hearing with the entire sales planning department. Everyone answered with the same phrase, "I'm incompetent, so I didn't deserve to attend the wedding." Mr. Anderson was confused. "Why do you all say you're incompetent?" "Well, if someone as capable as Ryan is considered incompetent, then we must be even worse." "Ryan is incompetent? Who said that?" "Mary." "Mary?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Anderson was completely baffled. And who wouldn't be? A charismatic and highly skilled salesperson known nationwide. She's a talent who was headhunted by Mr. Anderson with great fanfare to join the head office. How did it come to this? Mary only talks about herself and doesn't do any work. What do you mean? We think it's because she doesn't actually understand the job. But she's supposed to be highly competent. I guess she's good at selling clothes, but I don't think she's cut out for the actual operations. Your subordinate said this about you, by the way. Yes, I'm sorry to say, but she's not suited for administrative tasks. But she can still handle sales, right? She's good at entertaining clients, but she tends to make people uncomfortable. What do you mean? She always has to be the center of attention. After hearing about Mary's behavior and her track record, Mr. Anderson bowed his head to us. I had no idea it had come to this. I believed she was exceptional, which is why I brought her on board. And she was as a salesperson. But I clearly made a mistake in placing her here. I'm truly sorry. Even Mr. Anderson, who had once praised her so highly, had run out of patience. Mary was promptly dismissed from the company. It also came to light that Mary and Matthew had a secret agreement about the contract with Foster Textiles, which led to the cancellation of the deal. Matthew also took responsibility and accepted a demotion. This was when I learned that Matthew was actually the heir to the parent company of Foster Textiles, and Mary had quickly figured this out, aiming for a life of luxury. She carefully laid her plans, but her lack of integrity and relationships caused her to lose everything. How short-sighted. With the Foster deal back on the table, Timothy and I stepped up to renegotiate. The proposal I painstakingly crafted, combined with Timothy's exceptional presentation skills, made a perfect match. Foster Textiles was eager to move forward, and we both committed to shaping the future of apparel together. We've both had some tough lessons here, haven't we? Yes, but in the end, it allowed us to come up with an even better proposal. In that sense, maybe we should be grateful to those two. Perhaps. Let's work together moving forward. Absolutely. Let's create some amazing clothes. Once again, I have to say, Foster's textiles are truly excellent. The quality is undeniable, and the fabric feels fantastic. The new product they've developed has the potential to revolutionize the future of fashion. I look forward to working alongside them, creating a new era of apparel. To make clothing more enjoyable and a source of energy for everyday life. I want to wear this. Nothing else feels right. Creating clothes that inspire this kind of choice is our true joy and our ultimate goal. I create the clothes. Mary sells the clothes. Our roles were always different. Everyone has a place where they can truly shine. No matter how talented someone may be, it's difficult to succeed if they're not in the right environment. Bloom where you are planted. Such a wise saying. If Mary had stayed in her role as a local salesperson, she might have become a national or even global icon, celebrated for her exceptional skills. Just as I could never be a star salesperson, Mary wasn't suited for the sales planning department. In that sense, it's a bit sad. I heard rumors that after being fired, Mary returned to her hometown and started working as a store clerk at a boutique in a shopping mall. Back to her roots. Perhaps she'll once again achieve incredible sales numbers. Even if the day comes when I hear Mary's name as a charismatic salesperson once more, I wouldn't be surprised. It's entirely possible that in the future, Mary will be selling the clothes I design and bring to market. In a way, we're still comrades. We may never meet again, but wherever we are, I hope we can continue to support people who love fashion, sharing the joy of clothing with even more people. My name is Alex. I'm just an ordinary 38-year-old guy. Ever since my younger days, I'd grown tired of the constant grind of work, and as a result, my health began to deteriorate. Before I hit 40, I decided to retire early. After 20 years away, I returned to my beautiful seaside hometown, where I had left when I was 18. Now, I live as a fisherman, working 3 days a week and enjoying fishing. It was my grandfather, John, who introduced me to this job. He married young and had my father the following year. Since my father also married young, even at my age, my grandfather is still only 78 and continues to fish on a smaller scale. He used to take care of me a lot when I was little, so now that I'm back, he's overjoyed to have me around. Now that I'm home, he often takes me out on his small fishing boat and, before I know it, says, "Why don't you take over for me?" And started getting me involved in the fishing business. Well, I wasn't planning to go back to my old job anyway, so I figured it wouldn't be too bad to spend the rest of my life with nature. So I quickly agreed and started fishing with him. But watching my grandfather work all those years and actually doing the job myself turned out to be worlds apart. First of all, everything smells so fishy. On top of that, hauling in the nets, cleaning the fish, everything requires serious physical strength. Even though I was just helping my grandfather at first, it was tough, and in my heart, I was already complaining, "I don't want to do this anymore." But seeing my expression, my grandfather would grin and say, "Hey, what's with that pathetic look on your face? At this rate, you'll never be my right-hand man. Come on, bend your knees and pull properly." He knew how competitive I was, and this was always his way of motivating me. It was the same when I started playing sports seriously in school. The practices were brutal, and the coach was tough. But whenever I was about to give up, my grandfather would say something like, "Oh, so you're gonna quit just because some old guy yelled at you? You're not great at studying or talking, so what do you have to be proud of? Do you really think you'll achieve anything if you quit now? Push yourself and accomplish at least one thing that feels tough." Looking back now, I realize it was pretty harsh, essentially telling his own grandson that he had nothing good going for him. But my grandfather wasn't wrong. If I had quit the thing I started because I wanted to back then, I probably would have carried a sense of inferiority, feeling stuck with the regret of not giving my all in my studies or in sports. Having someone seriously scold me, then analyzing my weaknesses and working hard to fill those gaps. That's a lesson that applies to both studying and work. Plus, sticking with sports gave me the chance to talk to all kinds of people, from different ages and backgrounds. Because of that, I think I learned how to communicate with people who were totally different from me. I'm sure my grandfather, who always saw me as slow and clumsy, knew I would struggle once I entered the workforce. That's why he was determined not to let me quit the sports club. He wanted to toughen me up. Now that I've been through the challenges of adult life, I finally understand what he was trying to do. Thanks to that sense of accomplishment I gained from sticking with sports, I was able to dive into my studies with focus. Later, I got a job known for being grueling, but the resilience, physical strength, and people skills I developed through sports helped me cover for my natural clumsiness. For a while, I was caught up in work day and night in the city, but after days of not sleeping properly, my mind and body started to wear down. Before I knew it, I had aged prematurely, looking much older than I actually was. I was only in my 20s but looked like I was in my late 30s. At the time, I was appreciated by everyone around me, respected by colleagues, and felt fulfilled. But if you ask me if I'd want to go back to that time, the answer is no. These days, I hear young people bragging about how little they sleep or how many hours they work, but I think that's pointless. In fact, pushing myself too hard resulted in terrible results during my health checkups, fearing I'd end up seriously ill. I saved as much money as I could and decided that I didn't care about career advancement anymore. I handed in my resignation. My bosses tried to stop me multiple times, but there was no way I was going to trade my life and health for a job. My decision was firm. Now, I'm working with my grandfather, keeping active, though it's a bit harder than moderate work. Some might think I'm still young enough to work harder, but at that time, my body's age was equivalent to someone in their late 60s. Rather than continuing to wear myself down while I still had some energy, I figured it made more sense to quit early and extend my healthy years. I'd even heard stories of office workers who neglected their health, only to develop cirrhosis and receive a terminal diagnosis in their 50s. Those stories made my resolve even stronger. So, even though I won't be praised for accumulating more savings or feel personal growth, I'm fine with that. Realizing that my health is my most valuable asset, that's my greatest wealth. Watching my grandfather dive into the sea and catch all kinds of seafood made me want to do the same. That's also one of the reasons I decided to become a full-time fisherman. To catch seafood like that, I had to join the fishing cooperative and officially become a fisherman. As a result, I earned the necessary qualifications to dive into the nearby sea and harvest abalone and other seafood. This island also has a thriving farming community, with plenty of fields and rice paddies. We often exchanged various crops from the fields for seafood, and every day we ate delicious, fresh food. In this way, my life on the island became pretty fulfilling. One day, as I was walking along the harbor with my fishing gear like usual, I spotted something unusual floating in the sea, something big and pinkish purple. What is that? It didn't look like regular trash or clothing, and it seemed oddly rounded and three-dimensional. As I stared at it, suddenly I heard a splash, and the thing started thrashing around. To my surprise, the pink object was actually a young girl, probably around elementary school age. This is bad, she's going to sink if I don't help. Seeing her struggling desperately, I found myself sprinting across the sandy beach. I dashed across the sand and plunged into the water. Wading through the waves, I swam with all my might toward the girl. At that moment, I realized why my grandfather had drilled swimming into me so hard when I was younger. There's nothing much to do around here, so even small kids end up playing near the water. Even with parents being careful, it's common for kids to fall into the sea like this. My grandfather must have wanted me to be able to jump in and rescue someone if needed. Which is why he taught me how to swim for long stretches in deep water. Holding the struggling girl and floating at the surface, I was sincerely grateful that I had listened to my grandfather's advice. However, the girl was panicking and continued thrashing about. Hey! If you keep struggling, you'll sink. You've got to calm down. Stop fighting. But she was too frantic to hear me, and it felt like she might slip out of my arms at any moment. Just then, a loud, deep horn sounded in the distance. Hey! Alex! Grab onto this. My grandfather had noticed the situation, speeding toward us in his boat. He shouted while throwing us a life ring. Ah! Grandpa! You're a lifesaver. Grabbing onto the life ring with all my strength, I turned to the girl, calling out, "Look, help's here now. You're going to be fine. So you don't need to struggle anymore." Finally realizing she was saved, the girl stopped thrashing. Phew, I can finally relax a bit. I swam toward the boat, holding onto the life ring as it was being pulled along. The girl, exhausted from all the struggling, stayed silent, staring at one spot while I held her. As we got close to the boat, I lifted the girl out of the water, and my grandfather pulled her up with his strong arms. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, but the girl, startled by his firm tone, said nothing. Grandpa, noticing her silence, said she might have swallowed a lot of water. "We should get her checked out, just in case. Let's head to the doctor." After pulling me up, he revved the engine, and we quickly arrived back on shore. I rushed to my things and called the island's largest clinic. A young female doctor answered, and after explaining the situation, she said, "Let's have a look at her just to be safe." Meanwhile, my grandfather hurriedly asked the nearby residents if anyone had children's clothes to keep the girl from getting cold. This island, my hometown, is small. Because of that, everyone here knows each other and always helps one another out. No one was unfamiliar with my grandfather, and everyone tried to assist. However, with the aging population, it was hard to find anyone with clothes that would fit a young girl. The local school had been closed down long ago, and many of the younger families had moved away from the island. Most of the elderly residents had long since thrown out old children's clothes. However, as my grandfather kept asking around, he finally found someone who might have some. A couple in their 50s, considered young on this island, lent him some clothes and a towel that their son used to wear. And my grandfather hurried back to where my car was parked. He dashed back to my car, carrying the boy's clothes, which were close enough in size to fit the girl. We handed them to her and encouraged her to get into the car. We made sure to cover the windows to give her some privacy and handed her a towel. "Here, dry yourself off and change out of those wet clothes. After that, we'll head to the doctor," I said. The girl looked frightened. I smiled and reassured her, "It's okay. Nothing scary will happen. Thankfully, it doesn't look like you're hurt. We just need to make sure you're all right." Still looking nervous, she quietly closed the car door. After a moment, I heard her softly say, "Thank you," as she began to dry herself off and change. Once she had finished changing, my grandfather asked her, "Whose child are you?" But to our surprise, she said she wasn't from the island. "No wonder I didn't recognize you. So, how are we going to find your parents?" Grandpa said, looking worried. The girl didn't remember her parents' phone numbers and said she was here for the first time, on a trip with her mother. She wasn't even sure where they'd gotten separated. We both stood there for a moment, thinking. Her mother must be looking for her too, we figured. Surely, she'd have asked the locals and made her way to the police station by now. We decided to call later. Maybe we'd get some news from the clinic, or perhaps the police station had already reached out. With that in mind, we headed to the clinic to get the girl checked out. The island's only clinic had once been run by an elderly doctor who was known for being skilled but gentle. However, with age, he developed heart problems. After several treatments, he eventually returned to work. But he started reducing his clinic hours until he could no longer manage. That's when a young female doctor came forward, wanting to take over the clinic. At first, there were concerns about whether such a young-looking, inexperienced doctor would be okay. But it turned out she was actually around my age. Because of her skill and extensive experience, he decided to entrust the clinic to her. Since none of his children had pursued medicine, people had worried about the future of healthcare on the island, but she was seen as a savior. And the community was grateful to have her. The clinic, though old, was built with calming wooden tones, giving it the feel of a cozy retreat. Maybe that's why, as we approached the building, the girl seemed to relax a little. Opening the glass doors, we were greeted by the young doctor, who had a warm and gentle demeanor. "Ah, you must be Alex. Please come in," she said. Hearing that, I stepped into the clinic, and inside, it had been beautifully renovated. I was surprised. I remembered the old, dark floors with black stains, but now the space was bright, with large windows and a soothing wood interior. Even the old bookshelves had been replaced, now lined with magazines for the elderly. As I looked around, amazed at how much had changed, I saw the girl still looking a bit scared as she slowly followed my grandfather into the exam room. "Don't worry, nothing scary will happen. You were rescued quickly, so I'm sure you're fine," Grandpa said, gently patting her back. The girl finally relaxed a bit, her tense face softening as she entered the exam room with the doctor. The results of the exam showed that the girl's body was perfectly fine. Even though we had said she'd be okay, hearing the official result made us sigh with relief. During the exam, my grandfather contacted the police station, and sure enough, her mother had come in asking about her and was on her way to the clinic. When the girl heard this, her face lit up instantly, and she gave me her first smile, saying, "Really? Thank you." Not long after, we saw a woman running frantically toward the clinic from outside. Bang! "I'm so sorry. It seems my daughter caused you trouble." The woman, out of breath from running, was in her 30s, and she was beautiful and elegant. After scolding her daughter, she introduced herself as Lily. Then, she turned to the girl and said, "Hey, did you tell these people your name and thank them properly?" The girl, as if just realizing, suddenly snapped to attention and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Emily. Thank you so much for saving me." My grandfather responded, No, as long as she's safe, that's all that matters." "And you already thanked us earlier, didn't you?" After an experience like that, it's only natural to forget. Don't be too hard on her. Lily apologized again and bowed her head multiple times. Then she turned to me and said, "You're Alex, the one who saved my daughter, right?" I assumed the police must have told her, and I replied, "Yes, that's right." She continued, "I can't thank you enough for saving my daughter's life. I don't even know how to express my gratitude. There's really no need. I just did what anyone would do. No, I can't leave it at that. You saved her life, and I can't imagine what would have happened if you hadn't been there. I'm truly grateful." Tears welled up in her eyes as she bowed over and over again. It's true, if the girl had kept struggling, she might not have survived. In fact, accidents where people fall into the sea and never return are not uncommon around here. So Lily was likely blaming herself for losing sight of her daughter near the water. As I was unsure what to say to her, my grandfather chimed in, "At her age, kids are full of energy. It happens. But do be more careful next time." Lily wiped her eyes and nodded. Then she scolded Emily, "Why did you go off to such a dangerous place by yourself?" Emily replied, "Well, the men looked like they were having so much fun swimming." "Ah, she must have seen us diving for abalone the day before," I thought. "She must have figured that if she jumped in the water, she could have fun just like us." Still, I had to admit, for a kid to jump into the sea fully clothed like that, she had guts. We've had special training and are certified divers. The gear we wear is totally different from what you had on. You understand now. After getting in the water with your clothes on, how dangerous it can be, right?" Emily nodded quietly. Afterward, I made her promise not to do anything like that again. Even though I insisted it wasn't necessary, Lily handed me an envelope before taking Emily's hand, bowing, and leaving. As I watched them walk away, I thought to myself, she's quite the adventurous kid. If she ever wants to try diving again when she's older, she should come back and get trained properly. After they left, my grandfather glanced at me and laughed, "Ha! You saved a girl with the swimming I taught you. But because of your age and lack of exercise, you couldn't even get back on the boat by yourself. You've still got a long way to go, kid. Hey, give me a break." I tried my hardest, I retorted, glaring lightly at him. Noticing someone staring at us during our conversation, I turned and asked, "Is something wrong?" to the young doctor, who had just finished tidying up after the exam. For some reason, she was staring at us intently. Then she said, I didn't realize earlier because things were hectic, but your name is John, right?" she asked my grandfather. Yes, that's right. Well, this is kind of a coincidence, but when I realized you were John, I was so surprised. I'm Mia. Do you remember me? As she looked directly at my grandfather, he paused to think, and then his eyes widened. Ah, Mia from back then. With that, he began sharing stories of the past with Mia. When my grandfather was much younger, Mia and her parents had temporarily moved to the island. Mia had been a sickly child back then and often missed school, unable to attend classes with everyone else. The more she missed school, the more distance she felt from her classmates, which made it even harder to go. Even when others tried to be friendly, that gap was difficult to bridge. Eventually, Mia decided to focus on resting and recovering through middle school, so she could attend a regular high school. Though her parents, both doctors, made sure she kept up with her studies, having family teach her was often tough. Lonely from not having friends at school, Mia spent many days in tears. One day, while out for a walk, she spotted my grandfather, swimming joyfully in the sea. As Mia watched my grandfather swimming so freely in the sea, she thought to herself, it must be so much fun to swim like that. Noticing her gaze, my grandfather waved her over. When Mia ran to the water's edge, he swam closer and began teaching her how to catch fish in the shallows. From that day on, she started visiting my grandfather regularly, squeezing in trips to the shore between her studies. Her parents, seeing that it was helping to build her strength, allowed her to play by the sea. Slowly, Mia's smile began to return as she spent more time with my grandfather, surrounded by nature. She even made friends with the local children through her seaside adventures, gaining companions her own age. At that time, Mia's face was completely different from when she first arrived on the island. The pale, frail girl who had walked anxiously, holding her parents' hands, had transformed into a sun-kissed, energetic child. The island kids were kind and open, welcoming Mia without any barriers, despite her being from outside the island. Because of this, Mia felt free to befriend them as easily as if they were her classmates. She told us that thanks to my grandfather, the dark feelings she'd carried from the awkwardness with her classmates started to fade. And having friends her age gave her the confidence to return to school. As she continued to play with the island kids, her health gradually improved. And she no longer collapsed from exhaustion or caught colds after running around with them. Eventually, her parents told her that she was well enough to leave, and just days before her elementary school graduation, they announced they were going home. Mia's enjoyable time on the island came to an end after about 2 years, and she went back to her hometown to enter middle school. She was so fond of island life that she even pleaded with her parents to let her attend the middle school here. However, her parents, hoping she would become a doctor and knowing the island's middle school was in decline, didn't allow it. Mia left the island in tears, vowing she would return one day. Mia then mentioned there was something else she was grateful to my grandfather for. As a child, she had felt despair, believing she had no choice but to follow the path her parents had set out for her. It wasn't that she hated the idea of becoming a doctor, but she resented being pushed into it just because her parents were doctors, as if there were no other option for her future. I had my own will, too. But since they were my parents, I didn't want to upset them, so I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was always serious and obedient, so the thought of arguing with them was unthinkable, she said. During that time, my grandfather told Mia, who had complained about not wanting to be a doctor, "Look, no parent is going to abandon their child just because they get upset. Sure, there are terrible parents out there, but I don't think yours are like that. They moved to this island for you, didn't they? They even took time off work for it. Not many parents would go that far. So, if you're honest with them, maybe things will change little by little. Maybe their wishes won't change. But if you show them you can stand on your own 2 feet, they'll see that you can live well even without being a doctor. If they love you, they'll understand." Encouraged by his words, Mia told her parents she didn't want to take the private school entrance exams and chose to attend public middle school instead. Later, after searching the web, she learned that medical services on the island were scarce. And that's when she decided to become a doctor after all. My grandfather, not knowing this was the reason Mia had returned to the island as a doctor, looked astonished. I, too, was surprised to hear about my grandfather's past involvement in her life. With a soft smile, my grandfather said, "I see. Mia, you cared about this island that much. It's true, this island doesn't have much left. And none of us ever expected a young doctor to come. When the previous doctor collapsed, it was a serious issue. And everyone was worried about what the government would do. I thought they'd just send some random doctor from a university hospital, someone who didn't want to be here. But Mia, you're different. You're always so kind and smiling with the islanders, and you're a skilled doctor, too. To us, you're nothing short of a savior. Thank you for becoming a doctor for the sake of this island. But I'm sorry if we've put too much on your shoulders," Mia shook her head and said. She said that whether she became a doctor or not, she knew she absolutely wanted to come back to this island. When it comes to jobs here, there's only farming, fishing, or being a doctor. So, being a doctor was really the only thing she could do, and she was okay with that. Then, with a shy but adorable smile, she added, "I'm sorry I cried so much back then. And thank you for always helping me. Like that time when I slipped into deep water or when I tripped over that huge sea cucumber. I really appreciate it." Mia looked genuinely happy to see my grandfather again. That's when my grandfather smirked and said, "Oh, by the way, Alex here used to be a doctor, too." What do you think, Alex? It must get tough for Mia to handle everything alone. How about taking a break from fishing and helping her out at the clinic sometimes? I was 38. Mia was 35 at the time. And we were both single. I realized what he was getting at as Mia blushed and said, "It's true that handling emergencies by myself can be difficult. So I'd appreciate any help you can offer." With no way to refuse, I ended up continuing my medical career, despite having retired. Still, I was relieved that my skills hadn't deteriorated too much yet. Had several years passed since my retirement, it might have been a different story. If I couldn't perform surgery properly, there could be cases where it would be too late to help. I figured a doctor who couldn't treat patients when they couldn't make it to the larger hospital on the mainland would be no good. But here, unlike my previous job, things weren't as hectic, so I figured I could manage. And besides, I wanted to help the people in need. So I agreed to my grandfather's suggestion. A year later, although there were moments when things between Mia and me seemed to be heading somewhere, we never crossed that line. Even now, we continue working together at the clinic as good colleagues. Though it didn't turn into a romance, that's just like me, I guess. My grandfather, on the other hand, couldn't hide his disappointment, saying, "Well, that's a shame. I used to think I was done with work, but being thanked every day and having responsibilities gives life a real sense of purpose. Even elderly people work in chain stores or medical facilities. And now I understand their desire to keep working for life. Being told thank you by someone. Working to make someone smile. It's far more fulfilling than just doing whatever I want by myself." Thanks to my grandfather and Mia, I feel like I've learned what's truly important in life. With that thought in mind, I head once again to the small village clinic today. What should we do, Mike? He looks angry. My childhood friend shook my arm with a confused expression as she stood next to me. After a personal setback, I ended up getting a job at the company run by this childhood friend of mine. I was tasked with handling a business meeting because the client was said to speak English. If English doesn't work, what language will? To my shock, the client didn't understand a word of English. Worse yet, he started getting visibly frustrated. If we don't know, we'll just have to try something. Mike? If English wasn't going to work, we had to try something else. I turned to the client and used a certain method to communicate. Sorry to keep you waiting. Welcome to our company. The client's expression immediately changed. Man, life just doesn't go as planned. I clunked my fourth beer mug down on the table a little too forcefully. Then I slumped over the bar counter and let out the longest sigh of my 28-year life. My name is Mike Johnson. For reasons I won't get into right now, I'm in the middle of a serious drinking binge. Where did it all go wrong, damn it? I downed the rest of the beer in one gulp and raised the empty mug high in the air. Excuse me. Another beer. Wait. Suddenly, the room spun and I felt my body being pulled down by the weight of the mug. Crap, I'm going to pass out. I can't even get properly drunk. That's when I started really hating my life. Watch out. Someone grabbed my arm just in time. I was pushed back into my seat, and the mug was taken away from me. All right, sit down. You've had way too much to drink. Ha! The clear, firm tone of the voice gave me a strange sense of familiarity. I turned around slowly, my mind clouded with alcohol. We both exclaimed at the same time. Amy? No way. Mike, is that really you? The woman standing in front of me looked sharp, dressed in a sleek suit, the picture of a successful career woman. Her almond-shaped eyes, sharp nose, and vividly colored lips are strikingly seductive. She looks much more mature and beautiful than the last time we met. The person who had just saved me was none other than my childhood friend, Amy Nelson. When I saw a dangerously drunk person I couldn't ignore, it turns out it was you, Mike. Amy, it's really you, right? I'm not just seeing things because I'm too drunk. That's right. If you don't believe me, you can touch and check for yourself. What? I gasped, and the shock instantly sobered me up. Amy, seeing my reaction, chuckled playfully, just kidding. That smile, it was the same as when I last saw her 6 years ago. Yeah, it's definitely Amy. Ha! Hey, Mike, are you okay? What's wrong? Suddenly, all the tension left my body, probably from the relief. Like a balloon losing air, I collapsed weakly onto the counter. So, what happened to you? Amy asked, sitting next to me as she handed me a glass of water. I downed the water in one gulp before finally opening my heavy mouth. Got dumped. What? I got dumped by my girlfriend, and I quit my job today too. Wait, the job you worked so hard to get? The one you were so proud of? No way. I nodded silently, having no words to explain. Amy and I had been together since kindergarten, and we even went to the same university. She knew exactly how hard I worked to land that job. That's why, when she heard the words I quit, Amy was left speechless. I worked so hard for that job. Studied, interned, I gave it everything. And even after I got the job, but now I quit. I had always been proud to join the prestigious company I had dreamed of working for. I was eager to outperform everyone, to stand out more than any of my peers. But if that was a mistake, what were the last 6 years of my life even for? Once again, Mike takes the top sales award this month. Let's give him a round of applause. My boss, Tim, called out, and my colleagues burst into applause. As expected of Mike, our unbeatable ace. Man, no one can compete with him. Whispers of admiration, envious glances. Back then, I thought I deserved it all. Assigned to the sales department right after joining, I landed one new client after another. I smashed the old sales records, and by my second year, I took home my first monthly top award. I was the rising star. And I had the skills to back up that title. Of course, I worked hard enough to earn that name too. Studying even while waiting for a date? You're already amazing, but you're such a hard worker, Mike. That was from my girlfriend, who hugged my arm with a smile. We started dating in my 4th year at the company. She had a small face, big eyes, and a slim figure like a model, and she was easily the most popular among the guys. Her name was Emily, the receptionist at the company. That's one of the reasons I love you, but please don't push yourself too hard. I'm worried about your health, Mike. Ah, thanks. One day, out of the blue, she confessed, I've liked you for a long time, and I was completely swept off my feet. With a beautiful, caring girlfriend and a career that was thriving. I thought I had it all, both at work and in my personal life. But I was completely blind to what was really happening. I had no idea there was a trap lurking so close. Tim, what did you just say? Didn't you hear me? I told you to forget about the promotion we discussed. Tim, the sales manager, had called me into his office one day, his face stiff and cold. Just a week ago, the promotion news had finally come in. Emily had been overjoyed for me. I'm going to give the team leader position to him over there. You'll have to wait for the next opportunity, Mike. Wait, why? With all due respect, my performance is far better than his. Don't you get it? That's exactly the problem. What? I was speechless as Tim continued. He told me that I had become overconfident, believing I was the ace of the sales department. He pointed out that my attitude had grown arrogant, especially toward my superiors. He said that no one will follow someone who thinks they can get away with anything just because of good results. He suggested I take this opportunity to reflect on myself. This can't be happening. Tim's words felt like baseless accusations. Far from being arrogant, I had always been the first to help my coworkers, covering for their mistakes and supporting them. I made sure not to forget to be considerate of others, especially since things were going well. That included being respectful to Tim, my boss, so why this? Let me make this clear. As long as I'm here, you will never get promoted. No matter how much you achieve, I will ensure it never happens. That statement meant my path to promotion had just been completely shut down. And then things got even worse. So, I was only dating you because you seemed like you were going places. This is disappointing. Let's break up. When I told Emily what had happened at work, she immediately changed her attitude. She relentlessly insulted me, calling me a man whose only asset is his job and saying, I want all the time I've spent on you back. Then, she left me behind at our date spot and quickly went home on her own. You've got to be kidding me. I lost my boss's trust, my path to promotion, and my beloved girlfriend. Everything I had worked for was gone, and I was plunged into despair. The only answer I could come up with was, screw this company, I'm quitting. Without a second thought, I handed in my resignation a month ago. Though my coworkers expressed their regret, today was my last day at the company. And so, here I was, drinking alone. I didn't work hard just to climb the ladder. But now, I don't even know why I was trying so hard in the first place. I don't know how to move forward from here. I see. Amy nodded quietly as I vented my pathetic complaints, not telling me to pull myself together like I expected. I suddenly remembered that, despite her usual bluntness, she had always had this quietly compassionate side. Maybe that's why, back then. So, have you already found a new job? Ha? No, not yet. I stammered, flustered under the intense gaze of Amy, who had become even more beautiful. Suddenly, she smiled brightly. Good. Then why don't you help out at my company? Huh, your company? Yeah. I made my dream come true. With a proud smile, Amy told me she was now running her own business. She had started a company that exports Japanese food overseas. That had been her dream ever since our college days. At least until you find your next job, could you help me out? We're short-staffed, and I could really use the help. I'd like to help, but I don't know if I'd be of any use. You would. Please, if you help me out, I'll be your girlfriend. What? Stop it, don't joke around like that. Even though I knew she was joking, I couldn't help but feel my heart skip a beat. It reminded me of the time I confessed my feelings to Amy in the fall of our senior year of college. I've liked you for a long time, Amy. I've always liked you. It was a once-in-a-lifetime confession. I knew that there would be no going back to being just carefree childhood friends, but I was prepared for that. However, all Amy had said was a simple "I'm sorry." After that, things got awkward between us, and we drifted apart after graduation. Back then, I was only focused on starting my own company. I was so self-centered. I'm sorry for that. No, I should be the one apologizing. As the awkwardness between us faded, I realized how much we had both grown up. It felt like I was finally putting an end to my first love, 6 years later. But then, I'm serious. Ha? I'm serious about wanting to be your girlfriend, Mike. Seeing you again like this, it reminded me of how important you are to me. Amy. After we graduated and went our separate ways, Amy said she had been overwhelmed with regret. She couldn't understand why she hadn't accepted me back then. She wondered why she hadn't realized that she had feelings for me, too. I don't want to make the same mistake again. I believe this is the last chance God has given me. Amy. Amy smiled, her eyes soft, and in that dimly lit bar, she looked almost too beautiful to be real. Way too beautiful for someone like me, for sure. And yet, my heart was pounding loudly in my chest, as if it was expecting something. Here's my contact info. Take your time thinking about the company. And about her too. With those words, Amy left the bar. Even though I was alone again. My head was still spinning, and I couldn't bring myself to stand up for a while. President and CEO. The business card Amy left behind was the only thing proving that this wasn't all a dream. Even though I say I run a company, it's just one floor in a shared rental office. Amy explained with an embarrassed smile as she went over the business. It had been a few days since our reunion at the bar. Today was my first day at the office. Thanks, Mike. Honestly, I was starting to think you'd never call me back. You thought I wouldn't. Oh, yeah. Well, let's get to work from today. Yeah. I look forward to it. A slightly awkward tension hung in the air between us. It was obvious that we were both still thinking about what had happened the other night. That we had actually cared about each other all along. Oh, by the way, there's no one else here, but how many other people work here besides me? I asked, deliberately raising my voice to change the atmosphere. The rental office wasn't exactly big, but there seemed to be more space than necessary, and there was no sign of other employees. There aren't any. Ha! There's no one else. It's just me working here. What? I was at a loss for words, and Amy sighed, as if resigning herself to the truth. I might have boasted about making my dream come true, but this is the reality. English skills are essential for the job. But no one with those qualifications is going to join a tiny company like this. So, you've been doing everything by yourself this whole time? I've been constantly recruiting, but upon closer inspection, I noticed faint dark circles under her eyes. It was clear that Amy had been struggling on her own to keep her dream company afloat. I studied abroad during my sophomore year, remember? The local food just didn't agree with me, and I had a really hard time adjusting. I thought there must be other students like me, too. That's why I wanted to start a company exporting Japanese food so students abroad could focus on their studies without worrying about that. Yeah, I know. No one understood better than me how hard Amy had worked to make that dream a reality. That's why I wanted to help her now that she was struggling. That was the reason I had decided to join her company. I'll do it. Whatever I can do, I'll help. Two heads are better than one, right? Mike, thank you. For the first time, Amy's gloomy expression brightened. And just like I remembered, her smile was stunning. My heart skipped a beat at that moment. Suddenly, the phone on Amy's desk rang. Hello? Oh, hi. Yes, hello. Amy switched to English and started speaking with the caller. It seemed to be a call from an overseas business partner. As expected of someone who runs a company, she looked completely in her element. Just as I was admiring her, Amy's expression suddenly changed. Wait, hold on. Wait. Where's my notepad? Suddenly, Amy looked flustered and began rummaging through her desk with the phone still in hand. I quickly pieced together what had happened. The conversation had probably gotten so lively that the other person had started speaking too fast for Amy to catch. Let me handle this, Amy. I snatched the receiver and took the call in Amy's place. As I continued the conversation, I translated the content into Japanese and relayed it to Amy. They said the new flavored seaweed you just launched is a hit, and they'd like to try more products from the same manufacturer. Also, they emailed you a request from local students, and they want to check if you received it. I got it, thanks. Amy hurriedly checked her email folder and realized the message had arrived over 2 weeks ago. She apologized sincerely, and the client kindly accepted her apology. After the call, Amy beamed and grabbed my hand. You're amazing. Mike, you're incredible. Nah, it's been a while since I used English, so I was barely keeping up. Not true. Even though I studied abroad, I could never keep up with you when it came to English. I had always been good at English, particularly listening. As long as I knew the words, I could usually follow even fast-paced native speakers. Maybe that skill had been meant for moments like this to help Amy. But my English isn't the only problem. Another issue is that we have too few suppliers. Even if we get requests like this, we often can't respond because we don't have the products. Well, that's where I come in. Ha! I told you, didn't I? Up until a month ago, I was the top salesman every month. Oh. Amy, who had been frowning in thought, suddenly smiled as if a flower had bloomed. Her ability to push herself to the limit and her quick changing expressions hadn't changed at all from the old days. I couldn't help but smile along with her. Now then. If I recall, one of our current overseas partners studied abroad as well. They'll probably relate to this. Mike? Once I switched into work mode, I barely heard Amy's voice. I started making calls left and right, reconnecting with the clients I used to manage and setting up meetings. Mike. It's great to hear from you again. I'm so happy we can work together. Hey, Mike, I heard you switched jobs. I've been hoping we could collaborate again, so I'm glad you reached out. Each former client was thrilled to hear from me. When I explained that I was now working for another company and shared Amy's vision, they quickly showed interest. My company isn't looking into exports, but I know a CEO who might be interested. Want me to introduce you? Some even offered to connect us with others. No way. 3 new deals in just one day? And that's not all. I've got another 10 companies that showed promising interest. That many. Amy was so stunned by the news that she was momentarily speechless. And then, thank you. I knew it, Mike, I can't do this without you. Tears welled up in her eyes as she smiled. That smile had enough impact to send a wave of panic through me. There's no way I can let her show that face to any other guy. Later that weekend, Amy invited me to dinner. It was both a welcome party for me and a celebration of the new deals that gave hope for the company's future. Amy had chosen an upscale Italian restaurant with a first-class atmosphere and food. This is my way of saying thank you. If I want to properly express my gratitude to you, Mike, this is the least I can do. I wish I could offer you a bigger salary too, but I'm sorry. No. I was just lucky to have good connections. Being away from the business made me realize just how many people had been supporting me all along. Suddenly, Tim's words about me being overconfident came back to mind. At the time, I was shocked and couldn't believe it, but maybe he had been right. I might have been a little full of myself, thinking I was maintaining the top results all on my own. Now the real challenge begins. We've got to focus and make sure each of these deals is a success. I'll do everything I can to help. Ha ha. Amy? I tilted my head in confusion as Amy chuckled softly. Still smiling, but with a slightly amused expression, she said, Mike, you're still the same as ever. As we left the restaurant, Amy, who had been walking ahead of me, suddenly turned around. Hey, did you notice anything different about me today? Ha! Only then did I realize. Instead of her usual business suit, Amy was wearing a blue long-sleeved dress, something I'd never seen her in before. The dress hugged her figure, showing off her slim, well-proportioned body, though the neckline was just a bit low. The moment I realized, I could no longer look directly at her. Flustered, I quickly averted my gaze and awkwardly looked up at the sky. The stars are really beautiful tonight. Yeah, they are. Amy giggled softly as she stepped closer, standing next to me and looking up at the sky as well. Then, matching my pace, she began walking beside me. Even now, all you do is talk about work. When you get absorbed in something, you don't notice anything else, just like you used to. Well, people don't change that easily. Your seriousness and humility haven't changed either. I don't think I've ever met anyone who stays the same as much as you do. Amy, you're the same as you were back then. Amy hadn't changed at all. She was still hardworking, always giving her best while being considerate of others around her. And, just like before. You're beautiful. Ha? Oh. I mean, the stars. They're really beautiful tonight, aren't they? The stars. It's cloudy, and you can't even see them anymore. Oh, you're right. I stood there, frozen, realizing my blunder. Seeing me like that, Amy burst out laughing. Ha ha. Oh, that was hilarious. Do that face again, will you? It's not that funny. Anyway, it's late. Let's head home. Are you mad? Wait up, Mike. Amy ran after me and grabbed my hand as I started walking away. Her hand was colder than I expected, and I stopped in my tracks, startled. This caused her to bump into me, pressing against me accidentally. You shouldn't stop so suddenly like that. It's dangerous. Sorry. Even though she grumbled, she didn't look up at me. She kept her gaze averted but didn't let go of my hand. Amy. Hey. I had a really great time tonight. It's the first time I've laughed this much since starting the company. Really? Yeah, so? I don't want to go home tonight. The moment she murmured those words, my heart, which had been calm up until now, started pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. Does that mean? Was that just a joke, or would you prefer if it was? Ha? Amy looked up at me with serious eyes, staring intently at my face. Was it because of her bolder outfit tonight? I wondered if that had something to do with it. Just as I was about to ask, it happened. Hey, look! Isn't that the loser who ran away from his company? A woman's voice suddenly pierced through the night. I whipped my head in the direction of the voice, shocked. Standing there, of all people. See? I knew it. What are you doing in a fancy place like this, you failure? Grinning with a twisted expression on her face was my ex-girlfriend, Emily. The same woman who had dumped me the moment she realized I wasn't going anywhere in my career. And next to her, long time no see, Mike. How've you been? Casually greeting me as if nothing had happened was none other than my former boss, Tim, arm in arm with Emily. It's been a while, Tim. I heard the news. You found a new job, huh? I'm glad. I was really worried about you, you know. Thanks. The insincerity was palpable, and all I could muster was a dry, forced smile. Tim probably didn't know the whole story. He was just too good, too cocky. I found him annoying, so I pulled him off the promotion track, Tim had once said, laughing with the other employees. I overheard that conversation right before I quit. Oh, come on, Tim. Why would you worry about someone like him? It's a total waste of time. Emily suddenly interrupted the conversation, clinging tightly to Tim's arm. It was as if she was deliberately showing off their closeness. It doesn't matter how good he is at his job, if he can't climb the ladder, he's worthless. I heard he joined some small company. But that just means he threw away any chance of success himself. Basically, he has no future. He's just a know-it-all who'll be stuck working for someone else forever. Now, Emily, that's a bit harsh, don't you think? He was one of my subordinates, after all. Well, maybe, but I love you, Tim. I mean, you're doing great, leading people like a boss. When I'm with you, everyone else just fades into the background. Don't you like that about me? Of course I do. I'd never hate you. Tim, grinning foolishly as he fawned over a beautiful woman nearly 20 years his junior, was making a fool of himself. The respect I once had for him as my superior was now completely shattered. At the same time, any lingering feelings I had for Emily disappeared completely. No matter who she chose after dumping me, it just didn't matter anymore. Men need leadership skills to be worth anything. And depending on how far they climb, their lifetime earnings can be totally different. Ah, Emily, you're so smart. Let's go, Amy. I couldn't stand another second of this. I grabbed Amy's hand and tried to leave as quickly as possible. But then, is that girl your new girlfriend, Mike? You really have terrible taste in women. No surprise, considering you're a failure. What? This time, Amy became the target, and I couldn't help but stop in my tracks. Ha, look at her. She's so plain, not even cute, and totally looks like someone who's never had attention from guys. I guess it makes sense that you'd settle for someone like that. But girl, you really need to learn how to pick men. Or your future's looking pretty bleak too. Hey, knock it off. Apologize right now. Ha? What was that, loser? Didn't you hear me? I demanded that she apologize to Amy and take back her ridiculous insults. But just as I was about to repeat myself, something unexpected happened. Amy, who had been standing quietly behind me, suddenly stepped forward. You really don't get it, do you? Ha! Amy stepped between us, her hand on her hip, towering over Emily. With nearly a 20-centimeter height difference between the petite Emily and the tall Amy, the sheer contrast in size created an imposing presence. Even Emily, bold as she was, showed a slight hint of hesitation in her expression. I feel sorry for you. What did you just say? You dumped Mike because he wasn't going to climb the ladder, and now you're with someone successful. But are you really choosing men you love? Or are you just chasing titles? To me, it looks like you're just being led around by status. What the hell? What do you know? A woman's worth isn't determined by the man standing next to her. It's something she defines for herself. As long as you keep depending on men and mistaking their titles for your own value, your future is the one that's dark. Probably forever. You stuck up. Finally, Emily reached her limit and lunged at Amy with a furious expression. Instinctively, I rushed over to pull them apart. But it wasn't me who saved Amy. Now. Calm down, Emily. We don't want anyone we know to see this, do we? But she's the one who insulted me. Tim gently held Emily by the shoulders, trying to calm her down while putting some distance between her and Amy. Then, he turned to me with a smug grin. Mike, I hear you've been poking around our clients recently. You're not spreading any false rumors about us, are you? I would never do something like that. I'm just working with our business partners, continuing to be of service. Is that so? Knowing you, though, you're probably holding a grudge about being blocked from promotion. Oh, but that doesn't matter, does it? What could someone as powerless as you possibly do, huh? Ha ha. I laughed along with him, but for the first time, I felt something bitter rising inside me. It was frustration. Being mocked like this. And worse, right in front of Amy. How about this? Being powerless might just be a temporary state. What? We'll just keep doing honest business. And in the end, if our partners decide to trust us over someone else, well, there's no need for hard feelings, right? Mike. Tim's face turned visibly red, even under the dim streetlights. It was the perfect case of fighting words, but I had no regrets. No, This was my declaration of war. You think your little company will survive? Remember this. Oh, wait for me, Tim. With those parting words, Tim stormed off with Emily hanging onto his arm. As I watched them go, I felt a tug on the sleeve of my jacket. I turned to see Amy standing there. Amy. I'm sorry. I acted without thinking, and I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this. It's not your fault. Amy, who had been looking down, suddenly lifted her head. At that moment, a single large tear rolled down her cheek. Amy, I talked all big, but I've been relying on you this whole time. I'm the one who should have protected us as the president of this company. I'm so pathetic. That's not true at all. Amy, you're an incredible CEO. You've worked so hard. No. She wrapped her long arms around my neck, and Amy pulled me into a tight, powerful embrace. It's you, Mike. You've been working so hard in such a terrible place, and I finally understand just how much you've been through. Amy. Having someone who would get angry and even cry for me. Amy taught me that sometimes a simple embrace could heal even the deepest wounds. And there was one more thing. Thank you, Amy. I gently wrapped my arms around her and held her close. It seems I can't do this without Amy either. In that moment, I realized that I had fallen in love with the same woman for the second time. 2 weeks after our run-in with Tim and Emily, Amy and I found ourselves facing a new problem. I was ready for this, but I didn't think he'd actually make a move. So you think so too, Amy? That Tim's behind this? Yes. It was hard not to think so, given the circumstances. Ever since that night, the attitudes of our business partners had noticeably changed. Several companies that had been in the middle of negotiations suddenly contacted us to say they couldn't move forward with the deal. Whenever we tried reaching out to new companies, the moment they heard our name, they rejected us outright. This is bad. We've been getting more and more orders from overseas, and they're asking us to expand our product line. If we keep turning down their requests, they might end our contract altogether. I'll keep making calls and trying to set up new appointments. Can you negotiate with the clients to give us more time? Got it. I'm counting on you, Mike. Yeah. Let's keep trying and not give up. I didn't want to bow down to Tim's underhanded schemes. More than anything, I couldn't let Amy's hard-earned dream end here. With that determination, I kept searching for companies that weren't under Tim's influence. But finding partners willing to do business with us was proving to be an uphill battle. Then, one day, we received the dreaded call. An overseas client wanted to terminate their contract. They said they found a supplier who's more flexible. I get it, it's business. The local students will benefit from getting the products they want more easily, after all. Amy. It's okay. It's just one contract. We'll bounce back soon. Amy tried to stay positive, but her face was etched with exhaustion and disappointment. In a small company like ours, every contract was crucial. Knowing that, I couldn't bring myself to say, yeah, you're right with any conviction. Maybe if I swallow my pride and apologize, Tim will feel satisfied and back off. Mike. It's fine. I'm willing to do it, for you, Amy. Wait, what? For the woman I cared about, it seemed like a small price to pay. If it would make Amy smile again, I was ready to make that sacrifice. I had made up my mind. But just then, an unexpected message arrived. Sorry about the other day, Mike. I realize now it was immature of me. Tim had called me out to a cafe located between our companies. He was grinning, unusually upbeat, and shockingly, he apologized first. Sure. Now, to make up for it, I'd like to offer you something. That's why I asked you to come here. Offer me something. Yeah. Word is you've been having a tough time lately, right? His fake sympathy was almost unbearable, but I didn't have any proof that he'd been sabotaging us. I stayed quiet and listened as Tim pulled a document from his bag. Here. I mentioned it briefly over the phone, but this isn't a bad deal at all. As suspicious as I was, this was the reason Tim had lured me out. He offered to introduce me to Mr. Smith, who ran a large supermarket chain overseas. According to Tim, Mr. Smith was a huge travel enthusiast and would be visiting Japan next month. His supermarket is located near a student district with many Japanese exchange students. Doesn't this sound like a huge opportunity? Well, yes, but it sounds almost too good to be true. That cautious nature of yours, that's one of your strengths. But it can also be a weakness. You don't want to miss out on this golden opportunity, do you? Well, Tim's words were hitting harder than they should have, considering how desperate Amy and I were. Sensing our vulnerability, Tim pressed on. If this deal goes through, it'll reflect well on me for making the introduction. Let's work together for the sake of both our businesses, Mike. He subtly implied that this wasn't a trap, and he continued emphasizing what a great chance this was. The more passionate he got, the more suspicious I became, but at the same time, let me take this back and discuss it with Amy. Given our current situation, that was the only response I could muster. Yes, it seems a bit too convenient for us, but if it works out, it could bring us significant profit. When I brought the proposal to Amy, she reacted the same way, half doubtful, half hopeful. But the thing that she reacted the most strongly to was, so, a student district nearby, that must mean a lot of students struggle to find the food they're used to, right? It seems the supermarket doesn't stock many Japanese products, and there aren't any Japanese restaurants nearby either. That must be tough for them. It was obvious that Amy's heart was swayed by the situation. We carefully considered the proposal, double-checking every detail, the company name, the president's background, even the address of the supermarket. Everything on the documents was accurate. President Smith may not be a native English speaker, but he can conduct business in English without any problems. I know you're good with English, Mike, so I'm sure this meeting will go well. When we reached out to accept the offer, Tim seemed overjoyed, giving his stamp of approval. Encouraged by his confidence, I let my guard down. Tim's trap, however, was hidden in a completely unexpected place. The day of the business meeting arrived. We prepared English presentation materials and attached English labels to our product samples, waiting for Mr. Smith's arrival. I'd been brushing up on my business English too, so we're all set, right? Yeah. As long as you can convey your passion, Amy, this deal is as good as done. Okay. Amy, who had been a bit nervous, smiled at my words. Finally, the moment arrived. The door to the office opened a little after the scheduled time. And when we saw who walked in, we both froze. Mike, who is that? Amy whispered to me, unable to hide her confusion. I was just as baffled. The president of Sunday Happy Food Market, Smith, was supposed to be a fair-skinned, slightly overweight middle-aged man. But the person in front of us was a young, slim man with dark skin. Nice to meet you. Are you from Sunday Happy Food Market? I wondered if Mr. Smith had sent someone else in his place due to an urgent matter. I greeted the man in English as planned. But the man tilted his head, looking puzzled. Welcome to our company. We're looking forward to working with you today, Amy added, speaking in English as well. But the man didn't respond, instead scratching his cheek in confusion. Is something wrong? Do you think he doesn't understand our English? That can't be it. We've done plenty of business in English. The only other explanation is, I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't help but wonder. Could this be a trap set by Tim? I see. He said he'd introduce the president, but he never said Smith himself would be at the meeting. We've been played. Mike, what? Amy gently tugged at my arm, causing me to chuckle awkwardly. Without saying a word, she directed my attention with her gaze. The man was tapping his foot impatiently, clearly frustrated. What should we do? He seems upset. If English doesn't work, what language does he understand? That's the thing. In this day and age, you can't judge by appearance alone. We'll have to try and see. Mike? Amy furrowed her brows, clearly confused by my words. I patted her shoulder reassuringly with a smile. Then, I turned to face the increasingly irritated man once more. Tim had no idea. It wasn't just English that I was good at. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Once again, welcome to our company. I first apologized in Chinese. The man's eyes widened slightly, and his impatient foot tapping stopped. May I ask what country you're from? I switched to Spanish. The man's expression changed to one of confusion, as if he were thinking, what? By the way, it's quite hot today. How does it compare to your country? I tried to lighten the mood with some small talk in German. It wasn't the man, but Amy, who let out a surprised huh from beside me. Would you like some tea? We also have coffee. And forgive me for not offering sooner. Please, take a seat on the sofa. I continued in Italian, then Russian. Without using any gestures, I switched languages one after another, speaking to the man. Finally, just as I was about to try a certain other language. What's going on here? For the first time, the man spoke. At that moment, I realized which language I needed to use. I'm sorry for the wait. Welcome to our company. Please, have a seat. It's quite warm today, can I get you something to drink? Wait, you can speak Arabic too? The man, clearly taken aback, muttered in disbelief. Just a little. I replied in Arabic, feeling a huge sense of relief. It had been a bit of a gamble, but thankfully, I had finally found a language that worked. I could speak 7 languages, including English. Smith told me you guys only speak Japanese and Arabic. Since I'm from Saudi Arabia, I was sent here to translate. Didn't he tell you? In fluent English, the man who was Mr. Smith's subordinate revealed the secret. It was true that Mr. Smith was visiting Japan on a trip. But due to time constraints, he had sent his translator ahead to meet us first. However, we suddenly started speaking fluent English, which we supposedly couldn't speak. On the other hand, since there was no sign of us using Arabic, it seemed to leave them completely baffled. Lying in business is a big no-no. I started wondering if you guys had tricked Mr. Smith by telling him you only spoke Japanese and Arabic. I was so mad, I was ready to leave right then and there. But then, suddenly, the man leaned toward me with a serious expression. You're one hell of a liar. No one told me you could speak so many languages. I've only ever met one other person who could do that, our president. Smith. Thanks. The man, clearly excited, started shaking my shoulder as he rambled in rapid-fire Arabic. Mike? What's he saying? Well, to be honest, even I wasn't entirely sure I had caught most of what he said, but it was so fast. I think he's praising me. At that, Amy's face lit up as if she were the one being praised. 30 minutes later, the real President Smith finally arrived at the office. Behind him was an entourage of men and women of various nationalities. I've heard all about you. So, you're Mike, the Superman who speaks every language in the world. What? Somewhere along the way, the story had gotten twisted, but Mr. Smith greeted me with a big bear hug, absolutely thrilled to meet me. I actively hire immigrants as employees. So, Mike, how about working for my company as an interpreter? I'll promise you 3 times your current salary, no, 10 times. And just like them, I'll take you on a world tour at my own expense. Thank you, but it was an incredibly generous offer. But unfortunately, I already had a company I was committed to, one I decided to put my life into, and someone I wanted to keep supporting. So, shall we get down to business? From that point on, the office was filled with the sounds of various languages. Chinese, French, Spanish, Russian. Not only did Mr. Smith, who spoke English, ask questions, but his subordinates from various countries also began firing questions at me in their native languages. I strained to pull every word from my memory, juggling between languages, my brain nearly overheating as I answered each question. Why does this company want to sell Japanese food overseas? That question, asked in German, was one I couldn't answer myself. I caught Amy's eye and stepped back, signaling to her. This is something Amy should answer in her own words. I'll translate for you. Mike, okay. Please do. Amy spoke passionately in Japanese, and I translated her words into German. My translation was clumsy, but it seemed to resonate with Mr. Smith, who smiled warmly and shook Amy's hand. Right then and there, with a beaming smile, he shook hands with Amy and said, "Let's definitely do business together." And just like that, the meeting was a huge success. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done without you, Mike. After they left, Amy collapsed onto the sofa, looking completely drained. But even then, the first thing she did was thank me. You were incredible. When did you become so fluent in all these languages? I knew you were good at English. And you always picked up on languages quickly after hearing them once, but back then, you could only manage simple greetings. Well, haha. Amy looked at me curiously as I tried to laugh it off. The real reason felt too embarrassing to admit. Because the truth was, it's thanks to you, Amy. Me? Yeah. It all started when we had just entered college. Even back then, Amy was studying hard, aiming to study abroad. But I'm not improving as much as I want. Mike, you're so good at English. How do you speak it so fluently? It's all about how you pronounce the words. Here, try copying me. The only thing I could boast about to the always perfect Amy was my proficiency in English. I felt proud whenever she praised me, and I'd often play the role of her English tutor. But eventually, that wasn't enough for me anymore. In this global society, it's not just English that matters. You have to be able to speak multiple languages. So, Mike, can you speak anything besides English? Yeah, for example, in Italian, nice to meet you is Wow! That's amazing, Mike. When I greeted her in the little Italian I had just learned, Amy's eyes lit up, and she showered me with praise. It felt good. I wanted her to notice me more. Fueled by that simple desire, I started learning new languages, eagerly showing off in front of her. And before I knew it, I could speak 6 languages besides English. I guess I was just showing off. Trying to impress you, even though it was all just to look good in front of the girl I liked. Wait. So, Mike, you liked me even back then? Yeah. I've always liked Amy. That feeling has been the driving force behind everything I've done. And even now. I'm glad I brushed up on all those languages for today, just in case. It was tough, but I wanted to make sure I could help you no matter what. I confess that if a woman I liked was ever in trouble, I would always want to help her. The moment I said that, Amy's face flushed bright red. Sorry for making you wait so long. For me, no one's ever been as important as you, Amy. I still love you, or is it too late now? Mike. Without hesitation, Amy sat up and threw her arms around me. It's not too late. I've come to love you even more than I did back then. I always told myself I'd wait as long as it took for you to notice me. Amy. I hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by a mix of joy and affection. Finally, we had shared our true feelings for each other. My first love had blossomed after all these years. Thank you again for everything, Tim. A few days later, I reported to Tim that the deal had gone through successfully. Despite my gratitude, his face twisted in frustration. Mike, you. How dare you humiliate me like that? What do you mean? The deal went smoothly, and I'd say your reputation benefited from it as well. You never told me you could speak Arabic. It was practically a confession. Tim had clearly spread false information, hoping to sabotage the meeting. But now, the only one who had suffered was Tim, who had been caught in his own lie. With the deal secured with the large supermarket, our business in Japan has also taken off. Thanks again for all your help, Tim. Curse you. I won't forget this. Next time, you won't be so lucky. Tim stomped off, fuming, and I kept smiling until he was out of sight. Incidentally, that was the last time I ever saw Tim. Soon after, news of the beautiful CEO who started a company for exchange students reached the media. Amy's company received a flood of interview requests, and her business's profile skyrocketed. With business performance steadily rising, we naturally became much busier than before. Both Amy and I began to feel it was no longer sustainable for the two of us to keep running the company alone. So look at this. I tried recruiting new employees, and we got so many applications. Well, it is the most talked about company right now. We'd better get ready for interviews. They all seem like excellent candidates. I'd like you to help narrow them down with your vice president eyes. Vice president? Who's that? You, Mike. Ha? Will you do it? With that warm smile from Amy, the CEO who also happened to be my beloved girlfriend, there was no way I could refuse. And so, from a mere salesman, I found myself promoted to vice president. My days became even busier as I interviewed a flood of applicants alongside my usual work. Then one day, an unexpected person came to visit the company. Long time no see, Mike. Emily. Standing before us as one of the applicants was my former girlfriend, Emily. Her once brown hair was now black, and her makeup was more subdued than before. I know it's hard to believe I've changed, but those words from President Nelson, relying on men will lead you nowhere, really hit home. As it turned out, Emily had also broken up with Tim. Apparently, Tim had been embezzling company funds and even tried to drag Emily into it. When Emily looked back, she chuckled, realizing how it all connected with Amy's words. If I had stuck with Tim, my life would have been a total disaster too. Just thinking about that made me snap out of it. I realized I couldn't keep clinging to a man like that and needed to rely on my own strength. By the way, Tim was fired after the embezzlement was uncovered. The reason it all came to light was because Emily, who had been relentlessly pressured to reconcile, exposed his wrongdoings to the company. Tim fled before being prosecuted, and now no one knows where he is. Hey, Mike, I heard you're a VP now. That's quite a promotion. I do love ambitious men. Maybe I should set my sights on you? What? Emily gave me a mischievous grin, her eyes looking up at me slyly. Then, a low voice interrupted. Unless you're here for a job interview, I suggest you leave. Amy shot Emily a sharp glare, fiercer than I'd ever seen before. Emily quickly put her hands together in apology. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. I can't possibly compare to you, Ms. Nelson, my benefactor. I truly apologize for everything, both to you, Ms. Nelson, and to you, Mike. I mean, Mr. Johnson. I promise to turn over a new leaf and work hard from now on, so please guide me. What do you think, Mike? I hesitated for a moment, noticing a hint of her old self still lingering. But in the end, I decided to hire Emily as a new employee. Her interview was impeccable, and she had clearly mastered using formal language. She had also taken up business and English courses since breaking up with Tim, making her a valuable asset. Well then, I'm off to crush it in sales today. Now, she's one of the top sales reps at our company. She's also a great mood maker who always brings positivity to the office, and she's become an indispensable team member. I'm already secretly considering her for a leadership role down the road. We can't fall behind either, right? I glanced at Amy, and she smiled warmly. Of course. Things are only going to get busier from here, but you're sticking with me, right, Mike? Absolutely. Whether the company keeps thriving or faces challenges ahead. No matter what happens, I'll always be by Amy's side, supporting her. I nodded deeply, reaffirming the promise I made in my heart. And to help her achieve her dreams, I threw myself into work with even more enthusiasm. I just wanted the person I loved to praise me. The foreign languages I studied for that silly reason ended up helping us years later. You never know when something will prove useful in life. Even something I once failed at became the reason I reconnected with the person I love. When I think about it like that, maybe even failure isn't such a bad thing. I'm sure nothing in life is ever truly wasted. So from now on, I'm going to cherish every small encounter and casual conversation. That's how I want to live each day, moving forward with a positive outlook. You're just in the way. Don't you get it yet? An unqualified middle school graduate like you should just stand outside and wait. My manager, James, who had tagged along uninvited to a business negotiation worth $20 million, shouted at me with a clear look of anger. He then turned his back on me and quickly tried to start the negotiation with Mr. Ingram, the client's president. But Mr. Ingram, flustered, managed to muster a voice. What are you saying? Do you even know who Michael is? Of course, I know. Michael is my subordinate, a middle school graduate with no significant skills, an utterly incompetent man. James was laughing smugly, but in the next instant, his face turned pale. My name is Michael. I'm a 42-year-old company employee. I work for a foreign company that operates an e-commerce website. Our company is a bit different. It was founded by a young man who was a recluse in the United States. He was a born genius, and because his IQ was so high, he found going to school pointless and stopped going to school. Although he was encouraged to utilize the accelerated program, he found the framework of school too tedious, so he learned the basics by himself, which is quite impressive. As he continued to learn various things, his interest shifted to programming, and he developed software for programming on his own. Eventually, he launched an e-commerce website selling goods online and kept expanding his influence. That momentum didn't stop, and now the company has grown to have branches worldwide, not just in the United States. Because the founder is a free spirit, the workplace where I work also has a very open atmosphere. The company, which began with people who understood the founder's background and agreed with him, still maintains the same direction today. One day, I was interviewed by a certain media outlet. The interview request came from an economic web magazine looking to feature me as someone working for a company currently gaining momentum in Japan. So, Michael, is it true that your highest level of education is middle school? Yes, that's correct. I nodded honestly, and the reporter's eyes widened in surprise. In Japan, there is still a strong tendency to value academic background. So I'm used to this kind of reaction regarding my middle school education, but it seems my way of life is quite different from others. I understand this might be rude, but your background is quite unusual. I'm sorry, but is it common for someone like you to work in a company running an e-commerce website? No, it's rather unique to our company. As you can see from our founder's background, we have an environment that welcomes employees like me who don't fit the typical mold. I started working at this company 5 years ago. My previous work experience and the nature of my work caught their attention, and they invited me to join the company. Personally, I like this company's free spirit, which values individuality and emphasizes skill over tenure or academic background, no matter how large it grows. Thanks to this company culture, I've been able to work freely and comfortably since I joined. Since the company values employee autonomy, there is no concern about power dynamics or hierarchies, and no one, including me, cares about such things. Especially among the foreign employees, there are people with similar backgrounds to the founder. So no one cares about anyone's final academic record. So, I'm quite satisfied with the current environment and work hard every day. Therefore, I never expected the situation to change suddenly. The turning point for the company came when a new manager transferred from another department. This manager, named James, is 4 years younger than me. He's still only 38 years old. James was hired as a talented individual who graduated from a prestigious university and was quickly promoted to manager. He attended a prestigious private school with an internal progression system, advancing from kindergarten through university. Naturally, he was born into a wealthy family that could easily pay for all that education. And it seems his current position is also the result of connections, according to rumors. It's said that James's father and our CEO, Mr. Smith, have been friends for a long time. And that's why he got the job without the usual hiring process. However, none of the employees saw this connection-based hire as a big problem. That's because Mr. Smith is a caring person who values his employees and understands our company's culture well. We trusted that Mr. Smith would not allow a mere nepotistic hire. We thought James might just be someone with a good starting point, given his connection to Mr. Smith, but he could still be a promising individual. However, our expectations were quickly shattered. James, who appeared before us, had quite a troublesome personality. From the day he gave his introductory speech, he began boasting about his academic background to all the employees. As for his actual job performance, it was poor. He begrudgingly worked on even the simplest tasks like creating basic documents, often with a scowl on his face. On a daily basis, James looks down on colleagues who graduated from lesser-known universities, calling them ordinary citizens, and refers to those with only a middle or high school education as outliers. You should all understand that not everyone is equal from the moment they are born. When someone of a higher rank like me is standing in front of you, you lowly outliers probably get so nervous you can't even speak. He says such things with a straight face, so it was only natural that he was quickly shunned after his transfer. James is quite confident, but he seems to have a particular dislike for me, and among our sales team, his snide comments toward me are disproportionately frequent. I heard you're a middle school graduate. You're beyond just an outlier. You don't even seem like the same human being. I've never had a subordinate with just a middle school education, so I don't even know what to talk to you about. He says this loudly, giving me a mocking look. Hearing these insulting, provocative words repeatedly, many in the department began to question James's character and professional ability. Apparently, James had the same attitude at his previous company, where he had also been hired through his family's connections. However, due to his troublesome personality, he was given only simple clerical tasks and was left on the sidelines. But James, convinced of his own superiority, was quite frustrated with being assigned only simple tasks. This workplace doesn't understand my value. They don't appreciate me. That's why they're giving me such trivial work, he declared, leaving his previous company in a huff and joining ours. However, even at our company, he wasn't allowed to participate in any major deals. As a result, he became thoroughly disgruntled and began openly slacking off. Just as he had done at his previous job, he hardly did any real work, instead catching passing colleagues to boast about himself and lecture them. I graduated from a prestigious university, you know. I even get along well with the top executives at that company. When a deal was about to fall through, it was all thanks to me that it was salvaged. James would stop any passing colleagues and boast loudly, refusing to do any actual work. Worse yet, he neither had any knowledge of the work nor made any effort to learn. He even avoided attending regular meetings. Some colleagues began to wonder how someone like James could remain in the company for so long. Perhaps James was able to remain a manager because the company had grown so large. The company used to attract a sharp, unique crowd, often scouts from other firms or individuals with unconventional backgrounds. But now, it has become an environment where people with standard academic backgrounds who went through the usual job application process work alongside each other. This has made it seem more like an ordinary company, one that has even started accepting nepotism hires. In this context, the company has continued to employ highly educated but non-performing employees like James. However, James himself shows no doubt about his capabilities and proudly states, "I'm delegating the actual work to the regular employees. As a capable manager, I'm great at supervising and directing my subordinates." After a while, everyone gave up on treating James seriously and started to ignore him as long as he wasn't actively causing trouble. It was actually better for us if he just slacked off, as he wasn't much help even when he tried to work. This approach to handling James became well known within the department, but soon it led to a problematic situation. James had always been quick to attack me due to my educational background, but when he realized no one was paying attention to him, he focused on targeting me even more. An interview with a web magazine? Don't get carried away just because someone gave you a little attention. I'm not getting carried away, I replied calmly. As soon as the interview I had given was published, James scowled and came up to me. Seeing others receive praise while he was ignored seemed to irritate him, and he couldn't resist complaining. I heard you also managed to secure a few contracts with major manufacturers. Yes, I was just following up on existing contracts, I replied. Upon hearing my response, James snatched the contract documents from my desk and stared at them intently. As he flicked the documents dismissively with one hand, he sneered. Well, I guess a middle school graduate like you could only come up with a plan of this caliber. If I were in charge, there wouldn't be such a shoddy proposal. After all, there's a limit to what someone with your level of education can do. His blatant words left me stunned, and I could only remain silent. James probably thought of himself as a younger, more educated man, the complete opposite of me, a middle school graduate, and enjoyed feeling superior. For James, there seemed to be no easier target to feel superior to than me. Still, his words left me utterly exasperated. If I were handling this contract, I could have leveraged my connections from a top-tier private school. I would have turned it into something far more impressive than anything a middle school graduate like you could manage. That may be true. James's boasts always sounded like a child showing off. He seemed to believe that, as a highly educated person, he had hidden talents and abilities yet to be revealed, and that he was an exceptionally capable person. I had met people like him before, but never anyone who so openly insulted others. I thought I could endure it until he was transferred again. But constantly having my achievements belittled and mocked gradually wore me down mentally. However, James still held a position of authority over us, making it difficult to directly oppose him. As the atmosphere in the department grew increasingly tense, I decided to take the lead and directly approach Mr. Smith, our CEO. On behalf of the team, I suggested that James be either given guidance or reassigned, but I never anticipated that this would backfire. One day, I was steadily preparing for an upcoming negotiation. Then, suddenly, James walked briskly over to me and started saying something completely unexpected. Hey, Michael, I know you've been working hard, but I've decided that this negotiation is too much responsibility for you. So, I need you to step down. What? That's not true. I've been in charge from the beginning, and they've been happy with my handling of it. I replied, completely taken aback by his sudden announcement. The client I was preparing to negotiate with had been a partner since I joined the company. We had a long-standing relationship, and our previous meetings had gone smoothly. But despite my explanation, James just shook his head as if he were dealing with a fool. You just don't get it, do you? Did you check the client's background? He's an elite, just like me, with a high-level education. Yes, Mr. Ingram graduated from one of the most prestigious universities. He is an accomplished individual who runs an IT company. But how does that justify changing the person in charge? Being told out of the blue to step down from a client I had built a strong relationship with and gained trust from over the years was something I simply could not accept. I protested, but James ignored me and snatched up the documents I had prepared. He barely skimmed through them before confidently stating, "There's no way I can let a middle school graduate like you handle such an elite client. Only someone with a high-level education, like me, can handle this. But Mr. Ingram specifically requested that I handle this account. Mr. Smith, our CEO, is also aware of this." I insisted, determined to stand my ground in dropping Mr. Smith's name. I figured that the best way to deal with James, who had gotten his position through connections, was to have Mr. Smith call him out. Surprisingly, James burst out laughing as soon as I mentioned Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith himself asked me to do this. I feel sorry for you, Michael. From now on, I'm supposed to mentor you closely, as per Mr. Smith's direct orders. He said this with an exasperated look and then reached out his hand. Now that you understand the situation, hand over the rest of the materials. It's just not common sense to have a middle school graduate like you deal with an elite client. With all due respect, Mr. Ingram has expressed his desire to continue working with me. Changing the person in charge without any notice could cause problems. As I refused to back down, James's expression grew increasingly irritated. That's just flattery on their part. The fact that you don't understand something so simple proves how dim-witted you are because you're lowly educated. There's no flattery at play. The client knows me very well. He must have realized that I wasn't going to change my stance. James clicked his tongue in frustration, and before I could say anything else, he bluntly declared, "Anyway, I'll be handling the negotiation. If you make any moves without authorization, I'll make sure you're dealt with." In hindsight, I probably should have consulted Mr. Smith then and there. But I believed that if I handled things properly, I could overcome this challenge, so I prepared for the day of the negotiation. Leading up to this day, I had been pushed around by James quite a bit. After all, this was a major negotiation worth $20 million. James seemed desperate for the credit and tried various tactics to keep me out of the meeting and take it on himself. I somehow managed to attend alongside him, but he seemed quite excited, standing before such a big deal. At the client's office, Mr. Ingram, the contact person, was already waiting for us and welcomed us in with a smile. Mr. Ingram had graduated from a prestigious university in Japan, then studied at an elite university in the United States. After graduation, he was involved in management at an American company before returning to Japan to expand his current business, which was also in partnership with our company. I'm sorry for calling you here today. No, thank you for having us. Mr. Ingram had a friendly and cheerful personality, and even in important negotiations, he took the initiative to create a relaxed atmosphere. Thanks to his considerate demeanor, we were able to communicate comfortably and openly. But just then, James stepped in front of me and said, "Mr. Ingram, if I may. I'll be taking over as the person in charge of this negotiation starting today. My name is James, and I am the head of the sales planning department. I apologize if you've been inconvenienced by having someone like Michael in charge up until now." Without even glancing at the bewildered Mr. Ingram, James immediately spread out his materials and tried to start the negotiation. Mr. Ingram, surprised, glanced over at me, but I couldn't very well call out James in front of him. For now, I decided to let the negotiation proceed and took a seat next to James. But James, his temper flaring, turned to me and shouted aggressively, "Who said you could sit down? You're in the way. Can't you understand that yet? A useless middle school graduate should wait outside." He waved his hand dismissively, like shooing away a stray dog. His rudeness was so extreme that I was stunned beyond anger. Don't you get it yet? This is why people like you, with such a disappointing level of education, can't even comprehend how offensive it is to be in the same room. James wore a smug grin, emphasizing again that I was a middle school graduate. Feeling quite confident, he turned his back to me and quickly tried to begin the negotiation with Mr. Ingram. Mr. Ingram remained completely still for a moment, but then finally managed to force out a response. "What on earth are you saying? Do you even know who Michael is? James, startled by the anxiety and irritation in Mr. Ingram's voice, widened his eyes in surprise. Of course, I know. Michael is my subordinate, a middle school graduate with no significant skills, an utterly incompetent man. James's smug laughter left Mr. Ingram looking at me with an expression that suggested he was at a complete loss for words. It was clear that James really knew nothing about me. As I shook my head to convey this thought, Mr. Ingram put his hand to his forehead, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Observing the exchange between Mr. Ingram and me, James opened his mouth with a displeased expression. What's the matter with Michael? If he has caused any trouble so far, I apologize. After all, he is just a middle school graduate. It's really unfortunate that someone like him managed to sneak into our company. No, actually, he is. Unable to hold back any longer, Mr. Ingram tried to cut off James's rambling. But James, now thoroughly excited, began to ingratiate himself with Mr. Ingram instead. In contrast, I graduated from a prestigious university. While I can't quite match your impressive credentials, Mr. Ingram, you can rest assured that from now on, I will be handling everything personally. With each word James spoke, it felt as though the temperature in the room was gradually dropping. Yet, unaware of this, he continued with his fake smile, pushing aggressively to take control of this $20 million negotiation. I'm sure that incompetent middle school graduate couldn't explain things properly, so allow me to go over everything with you. Very well. Mr. Ingram replied with a heavy nod, which made James grin triumphantly, thinking he had won. But then, it was Mr. Ingram who changed the course of the conversation. Did you say your name was James? It's become quite clear to me that you have no idea who Michael is. What? What do you mean? In a clear and steady voice, Mr. Ingram calmly began to explain to James. James, you don't seem to know that Michael here is a co-founder of your company's parent company, the American headquarters. Huh? Co-founder? Michael? No way. James muttered, clearly stunned by the unexpected revelation. He seemed so shocked that he forgot to use formal language in front of Mr. Ingram. Letting out a long sigh, Mr. Ingram began to speak more slowly, with a hint of exasperation. If you kept up with economic news, you would know this already. Michael's name is everywhere, Mr. Ingram remarked. With that, he operated his tablet and held it out, displaying an interview article about me on the screen. The screen displayed not only the recent web media interview but also various past articles, books, industry news, and appearances on radio and TV. All featuring my face and name. The truth was, my life had been quite similar to that of the company's founder. In Japanese schools, the rigid curriculum felt dull to me. Since Japan had no accelerated programs, I found attending school to be a waste of time and instead stayed home to learn programming on my own. During that time, I came across the business of the founder, who had already established the company, and, out of curiosity, began examining it until I found a bug. Pointing it out via email led to a personal correspondence. Over time, as our cross-continental correspondence continued, the founder grew fond of me and directly invited me to the US. When he was building the current company, he made me a co-founder to help with dividing work and improving efficiency. The company then grew steadily, and, feeling I had done enough, I decided to retire. Just as I was considering taking it easy in Japan, Mr. Smith, who I already knew, reached out, and I decided to join this company. At that time, the Japanese branch managed by Mr. Smith was still small. But I was moved by his passion and determination to establish a convenient e-commerce site in Japan. Having long forgotten the passion for work that I once had when the company grew big in the US, I was reminded of it again. So I started working here 5 years ago, on the condition that I could work on the front lines. James, who had been staring at the tablet for some time, gradually lost his smile, his face turning pale. Watching him, Mr. Ingram quietly began to speak. I know what Michael has accomplished, which is precisely why I wanted to work with him. Please understand that. But he is really just a middle school graduate. It's an embarrassing background to have anywhere. James shouted hysterically, spitting his words out in confusion. His long-held belief in academic elitism had shattered. And learning the truth about the person he had looked down on so much caused him to lose his composure completely. With a forced smile, James kept trying to ingratiate himself with Mr. Ingram, almost desperately. Michael is a man without knowledge or education, a disgrace. Allow me to take over from this fool. And I implore you to go ahead with the contract. What I value is not academic background, but actual achievements. Moreover, I have no desire to speak with someone like you. At this pointed remark, James flinched, his shoulders jerking up in surprise. Mr. Ingram was no longer wearing his usual calm expression. Instead, he was glaring at James with a bitter look. Who is the one without knowledge here? Isn't it you, who didn't even know about Michael's accomplishments? It's impossible to negotiate with someone like that. If Michael isn't handling this, then the negotiation is off. But please wait. Just hear me out. I'm really talented and highly educated. I assure you, I can do an excellent job. Mr. Ingram shot James a disgusted glance, then stood up, preparing to leave. James, however, desperately tried to hold him back, his behavior becoming increasingly pathetic and distasteful. At this point, I could no longer just stand by and watch, so I stepped closer to the two of them. James, I think it's best if you stop now. Shut up. Do you realize whose fault this is? James shouted, brushing away my extended hand. He then glared at me, his eyes wide with anger, but I had more important things to do than to deal with him. I took a step forward and bowed deeply to Mr. Ingram. I sincerely apologize for this disturbance. I cannot offer any excuse for James's rude and disrespectful behavior, but I ask for your forgiveness. No matter how favorably one looked at it, James was entirely in the wrong in this situation. Even if the negotiation with Mr. Ingram fell through, there would be no grounds to complain, and it would simply be an unavoidable outcome. Still, I couldn't help but apologize, so I bowed deeply. Mr. Ingram responded with a calm voice. Please, raise your head, Michael. As far as I'm concerned, there is no problem as long as I can negotiate with you as planned. With a firm tone, he then turned his gaze to James. And if anyone should be apologizing, it's you, James. But, even after being told this, he seemed to think that lowering his head would mean admitting defeat. James squirmed uncomfortably, glancing back and forth between me and Mr. Ingram. Unable to tolerate his pathetic stubbornness any longer, Mr. Ingram spoke sharply. If you still don't understand, then leave now. I have important negotiations to conduct with Michael. I'll handle the negotiations. Please, allow me to stay. Tears of fear and frustration welled up in James's eyes as he tried to approach Mr. Ingram. His eyes were red, and he occasionally sniffled pitifully. By now, his behavior was so childish it was hard to believe he was a grown adult. He was the complete opposite of the confident man who had walked into the conference room earlier, now reduced to a miserable figure. However, Mr. Ingram delivered his final ultimatum firmly. I said leave. I don't want to see your face anymore. Upon hearing this, James staggered back a few steps, muttering incomprehensible words while shaking his head. Realizing that neither I nor Mr. Ingram would relent, he seemed to understand that he had no allies left. He hung his head low and trudged out of the office. Afterward, James returned to the company and immediately went to Mr. Smith to complain. He tried to accuse me of monopolizing the negotiation, but instead, it was James who got a scolding. "You've made quite a mess." While Michael managed to salvage the situation, "Why did you interfere with the work?" "But, Mr. Smith, didn't you instruct me to supervise Michael closely in all future tasks?" James had expected Mr. Smith to join him in reprimanding me. Trying to win sympathy, he cozied up to Mr. Smith, but that only made things worse. "What are you talking about? It's the opposite. I told you to work alongside Michael and learn from how he does his job." "But," James murmured, clearly confused. It turned out that Mr. Smith had intended to retrain James from the start. He had deliberately assigned him to my department to learn the proper attitude and work style. Mr. Smith knew James had an elitist attitude, but he had hoped that seeing me, a person without a formal education but with a proven track record, up close would change his perspective. However, James's preconceived notions were even more deeply rooted than Mr. Smith had anticipated. Believing he had nothing to learn from a middle school graduate and that his role was to discipline and weed out the unqualified, James had taken it upon himself to act recklessly. Even after all this, James continued to argue and resist. But a background check revealed that he had been taking credit for his subordinates' achievements. A review of his sales records showed he had often rewritten the accomplishments of others as his own to make himself look better. To the very end, James kept shouting, "This is Michael's revenge. He's just jealous because I'm highly educated, and he's not. It's all his fault my life is ruined." But it was obvious that he had only himself to blame. A few days later, Mr. Smith personally decided on James's punishment, assigning him to a distant overseas branch. It is a country where not only Japanese but even English was hardly spoken, so before his departure, James chose to resign voluntarily. After that, he tried several times to find a new job, but he never managed to stay anywhere for long. Still, needing to work to survive, he now reportedly works in harsh conditions at a construction site, doing manual labor. His colleagues and supervisors are all strong people who don't care about academic backgrounds, and James, lacking in physical strength, is mocked endlessly but continues to work out of necessity. As for me, the $20 million deal between Mr. Ingram and our company went smoothly after James left. Afterward, I was promoted to head of the sales department, taking on the leadership role that James had left vacant. I had once left the corporate world. At that time, I thought it would be nice to live a laid-back life. But now, I find myself surrounded by subordinates who respect me, a CEO, Mr. Smith, who relies on me, and clients who trust me with their business. Leading a fulfilling life. Even though I had been satisfied when I left the company, it seems I still have new challenges ahead. From here on, I plan to keep working hard, making the most of my abilities, alongside my colleagues at the company.